All right, once you get the everything out of the kit and you've checked to make sure all the parts are there, it's time to assemble these. So what we start with is each of these are labeled, and the front two, so up in the front you'll see a little mountain. All right, to assemble your speed struts, once you pull everything, all right.
Go for it.
Let's get it going. All right, now it's time to assemble the speed struts. Now the first thing you're going to do is lay them out on a surface that's long enough for them all to lay end to end on. And you'll notice that the speed struts have a little mountain on them, and then right below a number. So you're going to think of it this way. All the mountains are pointing towards the forward of the van. So you're going to lay all the mountain ends in one direction. You're going to start with 1, move to 2, and 3. Now on the tails, these are at the aft side of the vehicle. The 3 is labeled with a 3P for passenger and 3D for driver. So those are the only pieces that are specific to one side of the vehicle or the other. The rest of the pieces can be swapped on either side. There are 2 pieces of ceiling track that come together in the middle of the vehicle, and you'll notice that there's 2 PEM nuts that are really close together, and that's where they join. So when you get your ceiling pieces out, there's a number stamped into the back, and it'll correlate with the sheet that you have, but basically it's an extension of the numbering system from the rest of the A-frame. So for the 144, for instance, I think there's 21 pieces in the A-frame, so we just continue that number to 22. Now the 2 forward pieces will have the same number on it, and they will be the lesser value. So if it's 22, this is also 22, then these are labeled 23, and then you know that the greater value goes to the aft side of the vehicle. When you're sorting them out as well, these are the only pieces of the kit in the 170 that has a cut that is halfway through one of the little bump outs here. So the rest of them, it'll be pretty easy to identify, is what I'm getting at. Now, to put them together, they can only go on one way. The holes will not line up if they are off. So you can look at this one track here, or one piece of the A-frame strut here, and you'll notice that all of the holes are hitting. If they're not, then you'll have to flip it around and match it up, or put it in the back and the front. So they can only go on in one direction, is what I'm getting at. So I just start by putting the holes in one piece, I move to the next piece, and then I move to the last piece. But since we've got Jared here from Mammoth Vans, we're gonna load them all up from both sides. It's important to hand tighten these first. I usually tighten these by hand so that I'm not reefing down on it with a drill. If you do use a drill, be very, very delicate with it and make sure you start it by hand first. You don't want to cross thread these. You're going to tighten them all the way down. It'll lock the speed struts into place. I can also say that at the very end, if we're going to fast forward through that.
Okay.
Okay, so it's important for you to tighten these all the way tight because it locks the track in between where the speed struts break. Do not install these speed struts without putting the track on first. Because of the fluctuation that you can get by the movable parts, the holes might be misaligned. If you've already done that, you made a mistake, you didn't watch the video, all you have to do is loosen these bolts on all of the ribs and then put the track up and slide it so it aligns. But it saves you a lot of headache by just doing it first. Alright, so we're now going to take these into the vehicle and show you how to get them installed. Alright, this is the set tool that'll help you align the track with the ceiling. And the way it works is you have this steel collar, you'll slip it all the way up to the top. That allows the tool to open, and these will be narrower and they'll be able to slip into the holes that you're going to use. And the holes are the widest surface in between here. You'll notice 3 of the indentations on the OEM holes. You can use the 2 that are towards the edge of the vehicle. And once you slip it in there, you can pull this collar down and seat it entirely. The mechanism will push it up as well as align it side to side. You do not want to set a screw or a rib nut or a bolt or punch any holes on any of these ribs unless this is underneath that rib. That's very important because it'll align it, and the aluminum and the steel, especially over the length of a 170, is flexible enough to drift. So you want to work on the rib that the tool is set on. When you're done punching those holes and setting those rivets or through bolts, whichever you intend to use, you will then slip it up and release it. Okay? It's important also that the front of this track is butted up flat against the front rib. Because it floats, you could potentially set all of this, tighten your side bolts, and have a gap up there. So when you put it up there, drive it forward so it's bumping into that front rib, then set your tools. All right? So with that, we're going to go ahead and put it up. And there's 2 different ways to do it. One are with the 1/4-inch stainless steel rivets, and one is with a through bolt. If you're running a through bolt, you're going to run one side, turn around, run the other side of that single bolt, slip your bolt through it with the washers on either end and tighten it down. When you're doing the rivets, it's important to do one hole, set the rivet, then move to the other hole. And you kind of give a little bit of a palm up and push that little collar up and punch that hole. You'll see it in detail right now. First thing we're going to do is remove this clip that's holding the OEM harness. Now this wire can pass above or directly behind the track here. I've left a little bit of an extension on the track, so if you're doing it alone, you can rest it here like this and then move out and set your holes. For this one, we'll run it right over the top. So that's how it's going to end up fitting in the back of the vehicle. We're going to drive this thing forward so it hits the front of the van, and we'll show you that up front.
On the front part of the ceiling strut, you're going to run into the very first rib running left and right on the van. You want to send this strut all the way forward so the tabs are resting against the rib before you begin to drill and lock in place. The floating cartridges will be able to move back and forth across the rest of the ribs. This one has no adjustment, so you want to make sure it's all the way forward before drilling. As you can see, we have some tape on the track. It's just a preventative measure to protect the track from some of the slightly sharp metal edges of the tool. So if you want to lay some tape, it'll help prevent this from getting scratched. Then you can go ahead and place, squeeze, pull the slide all the way down. The tool's locked in place. Again, make sure you're never drilling any holes and setting your bolts without the tool being in place on the rib that you're working on. You only move to each next rib when the tool is locked in place to drill your bolts.
When you drill your first hole, this collar is floating a little bit, so I like to make sure that it's up. So I just kind of, with the drill bit, float it to the top, punch it, make sure you set this rivet before you drill your next hole. Now that this side is set, I'll move to the other side. If you're working in pairs, you can, the guy on the drill, now that this is set, you can punch the other side. If you're working in pairs, the person on the drill can punch one hole for you, move to the other side of the vehicle, punch one hole on this flange, move back to this flange after this rivet's set, and you'll see when Jared and I get into it, we'll have a rhythm where we sort of just keep flip-flopping sides on each of these. Again, I'm making sure that this is up a little bit just by using the tip of my drill to pull it up. So we're going to do the same thing, move through the whole vehicle. And this obviously is the process if you have the tools to set the thick 1/4-inch stainless steel rivets. If you don't have this tool, it's a simple punch hole here, punch hole on the other side, slip your through bolt through and tighten it. We're not going to demonstrate that. We figure if you're capable of doing this, you're capable of setting a through bolt. This rib is canted down a little bit. So the tab here is going to be holding the track down just a little bit more than we like, and all you have to do is give it a little bit of a shove up, and it's because it's very flexible, so shove it up a little bit before you set your hole. Another thing to note, these holes here seem to be random in terms of whether or not they're going to hit on this hole. So often one hits on the hole. For instance, the backside here, I can see half of one of these little OEM holes. So I do not want to set that first. And because it's halfway through, the rivet's not going to sit real well, so I will through bolt this one while the rivet will hold nicely over here. But wherever your punch hole, if it's in front of one of these OEM holes, do not punch your hole there. If it's actually covering both of them and you have bad luck in that sense of your van, go ahead and put a steel clamp on the side so that this doesn't drift over while you're punching that hole. And again, through bolt it if you're anywhere cutting into one of these holes. With this one, we got lucky as well in that the entire circle is within this, or the entire OEM hole is within that perimeter. So you can set a rivet here. It's only when the circle is halfway open and the hole you punch is going to be deformed. So we're going to go ahead and set a rivet there too. Never mind. right angle drill for the back of the 170. There are also smaller bits that you can use, but either way, you're going to have a little bit of a trouble with the full-size drill in this back area. An impact drill will also be okay because it has a shorter top, but you need a little special bit that will fit into those. Before you drill the back, the OEM wire is passing across the top of it. You're just going to want to be very conscious that your drill bit is not chafing against it. So tuck that wire up out of the way and do not let it touch the drill bit. If you need to, you can also put a piece of cardboard or plastic to shield it, but there's plenty of room to tuck it away. Just be very aware of it. So we completed one side, we're going to just rinse and repeat on the other side. All right, once you got them installed, the last part of this process is tightening these side bolts here. You're going to use a 10mm socket, and we just go ahead and put it on an impact driver. Give a little bit of pressure underneath. It shouldn't be saggy at all if you were good about setting these up high, but if you set them low or if they're a little bit off, just give a little hand pressure underneath, slip it on it, and drive it in. And that's all it takes. We're going to do it on each one of these, both sides, and it locks it into place. All right, we're going to put in the center brackets that hold the ceiling panels to the roof and kind of create that slight camber. You'll notice again, like I said, there's one side that are cut off. This one goes on the very forward rib, and that's because the rib is actually canted, so it has a little bit of a different bend profile, whereas this one, the angle is a little bit more accentuated for the center ribs. And there, you'll notice a nylon guide, and if you come over here to the front, so this guide sets into the center hole, and you'll put it on the inside, the aft side of this rib here, and punch the hole. Again, just make sure you're not reefing the drill bit against the wiring harness. There's plenty of room for it. On another note, these are set with 2 holes. Eventually we're actually going to eliminate one of these holes, so there will only be one choice, but there's no real structure this is holding up except for the camber of that ceiling. So only punch one of the holes on either side, and if you get one that has the 2 holes in it. So So again, with the guide here, all you're worried about is setting it up into the ceiling, pushing up on it. It will not move in any direction. After you set that first one, there's a little bit of room because this is now tight and pinched. So again, just make sure you're nice and tight. Yep. Okay, so the placement for the next set that are rounded, the way I think about it is that these are going to face inward to the bay where the fan is. And so that's the second bay, so they're going to be on either side of that bay, like so. This one's going to be placed here, while this one's placed here. All right? And with the 144, that same framing of the bay where we would put the second fan is how these go in. With the 170, it's a little bit different because we have a little bit different structure back here, and we'll get to that. Do it on this side. Now, if you're going to put the fan in the rear position for the Adventure Wagon kit, it is in this 6th bay. So this next piece goes just like it did around the fan on the first one, where it is facing away forward of that 6th bay. The last one will go on the aft side of the very last rib. And you'll need your shorter angle drill or your whatever setup that you use to install these tracks to get into that space. All right, with that, we're done with this step. Now we only have 2 more bracers, bracing systems to put in, and these 2 will hold the ceiling panels in, but they will also hold track in. We'll show you those. All right, so this piece also has a center guide. It is going to go on the 0 line of the vehicle. So we'll put it up into the center, and it'll hold where it needs to be. Now the key with this is do not just start setting your rivets now, because we need to pilot a hole directly into the center line so that the backside of the PEMs will be able to slip up into it, and this lays flush across this rib. So the way I like to mark that is there's 2 different ways, and if all you have is one of your rivets, it works well. You can also use your set punch that you've been using if you've been using one. So set it up into that middle area and give a little hold up nice and tight and give a little scratch mark there. Hold it nice and tight and put a little scratch mark there. And that's pretty much all you need. You just need to have an index. A simpler way would just be to go ahead and put a couple of pops with your punch. right, so now we're able to see where our marks are to punch these holes. All right, I'm buttoning up because this next step is it's actually probably the most dangerous part in terms of getting something in your eye or getting a burn. We're going to put the step bit through these holes, and it will dump large size pieces of very hot steel down on you. And it is no joke. I've had burns on my face that have lasted 2 weeks. And if you get it down your shirt or against your neck, it'll leave a mark. So definitely wear your eye protection. And if you even have a full face shield, this is the time to use it. Okay. Now when you drill this hole, you're going to oversize it. So go for at least a 1/2 inch wide hole, and you can blow it out to be even larger. It's not critical. I can smell burning hair. Yeah, they're really hot. So before you go ahead and deburr it, just double check, make sure that it sits flat, which this does. And you can even sort of visually look to see if you're lined up on both sides, which it looks like we are. This process is going to leave shavings in this channel. So after we install everything, we're actually going to take an air hose and blow into this channel, and they'll end up falling out of these OEM holes up here. But it's a good thing to do on each of these channels, just to kind of blow the debris out and make sure that you're not having little chunks of steel up there that might start catching rust. They are coated on the inside with some kind of wax that Mercedes uses, but I don't like to leave them up there anyway. With this step, I'm literally scraping the brush off into the back of this thing, so it's kind of creating a little bit of a pool behind it. We're not setting any rivets or anything into it, but it is nice to just know that the rust preventative is really coating it. Now that that's done, we really don't have to worry about which side faces which direction. It's symmetrical. So we're just going to put it up there. And with this, there are 2 on each holes. Do use both of them this time because the track is going to go across here as well. So there may be load on it. All right, when you're finished with this guy, we're gonna set the second one in the back. With the 170, it has 2, 144 only has 1. So we're gonna go back, and we're at, if you count, this is the first rib. We're at 1, 2, 3, 4 is the 0 line, 5, 6, 7 is the next rib that you're going to put this cross piece on. All right, we're at the 7th rib here, counting from the forward part of the vehicle back. And we're gonna do the exact same thing. We're gonna line up our holes that we're gonna drill first. And we're gonna do the what we nicknamed the hot lava process here. Before we do any work on it, we're going to double check it. Okay, so here's an example. This side is not laying fully down, so I'm going to just sort of move it one way or the other. To see which side this needs to open, but really, if it's not open, just open it to the next step bit. Now it lays flat. So we know that we can go ahead and deburr it, coat it, and set this piece.
When you're all done riveting or through bolting all of your ceiling struts and cross pieces for the ceiling mounts, if you have access to compressed air or any type of air in a can, there's going to be some metal shavings inside the rib that you can actually help clear out and will fall out through the sides here. So if you have some compressed air with a fine-tipped air gun, you can find the factory holes on either side of the rib and stick the nozzle in there, and you can hear blows out the metal shavings. They'll fall off the side, and you can get it to make sure you get both sides, and go through all the ribs and get some of that nice freshly cut sheet metal out of the ribs and down, so when you clean out the rest of the van, you can clear as much of that as you can.